Amsterdam looks nothing like the other capitals of Europe. No grand boulevards, no royal palace commanding the skyline. Yet its 17th century canals once powered the world's richest trading empire. How did a city built on millions of wooden poles driven deep into marshland become the inverse of Paris or London, ruled not by kings, but by merchants? The answer reveals why Amsterdam's maze of canals, tilted houses, and radical social policies upend everything you think you know about European cities. And it exposes the high stakes of preserving a model the rest of the continent could never quite copy. To understand how this watery paradox rewrote the rules of urban life, we need to start out at ground level, where every foundation and every decision set Amsterdam apart. Peat and clay stretch deep beneath Amsterdam's streets, a reminder that the city's foundation is anything but solid ground. Medieval settlers faced a swampy expanse where even a modest house would sink without support. Their solution was radical. They drove millions of wooden piles down through the mud, searching for a stable layer of sand sometimes more than 10 meters below the surface. Today, nearly every building in the historic centre, from narrow canal houses to the massive central station, stands on these submerged timber columns. The city's bridges and quays alone rest on thousands of piles each. Central Station uses 8,687 piles. The city as a whole sits atop an estimated 11 million piles. This hidden forest of wood survives only because Amsterdam's water is carefully managed. Timber piles remain strong as long as they stay underwater and are sealed off from oxygen. If canal or groundwater levels drop, the tops of the piles dry out, rot sets in, and buildings begin to tilt or settle unevenly. Engineers and city officials monitor water levels with precision, knowing that a few centimetres can mean the difference between stability and costly repairs. Recent studies, including a 2025 survey of bridge foundations, confirm that decay is concentrated at the pile heads, right where water exposure fluctuates most. The city's entire urban structure is defined by this delicate balance. Amsterdam's 165 canals, stretching over 100 kilometres, are not just picturesque, they are essential infrastructure, acting as both drainage and defence for the piles below. Water boards, called waterschappen, set strict targets for canal levels, prioritising the health of these foundations over other urban needs. This means that any plan for large-scale redevelopment, demolition, or deep excavation faces not just technical hurdles, but legal and hydrological ones as well. The result is a city where the past is literally embedded in the ground, a place where every street and building depends on the careful choreography of water, wood, and municipal vigilance. Amsterdam's streets are lined with some of the narrow houses in Europe, a direct outcome of a centuries-old tax code. In the city's golden age, property taxes were not based on the size of a house or its value, but on the width of its frontage along the canal. Every extra metre facing the water meant a higher annual bill. For merchants, the solution was simple: build tall and deep, but keep the facade as slim as possible. Typical canal houses measure just 5 to 8 metres wide, yet stretch back 20, 30, even 40 metres from the street. This fiscal logic turned the city into a patchwork of slender parcels, each one owned and developed by a different individual or family. Unlike the grand uniform blocks of Paris or Vienna, Amsterdam's canal belt became a showcase for private ambition. Every gable told a story, neck, bell, or stepped shapes, each reflecting the owner's taste and means. Merchants competed not for the widest house, but for the most distinctive facade within their narrow slice of frontage. The city's famous dancing houses, with their tilted walls and leaning profiles, are a byproduct of this parcel system. Some tilts are the result of centuries of settling on soft ground, but others were intentional. Many canal houses were built to lean forward, making it easier to hoist goods up from the street or canal below. Nearly every house has a hoisting beam or iron hook at the top gable, allowing bulky cargo to be winched into upper floors without damaging the facade. This architecture of necessity gave Amsterdam its unique rhythm. The relentless march of narrow houses, each subtly different, made large-scale redevelopment nearly impossible. Thousands of individual owners, each with their own interests and investments, created a cityscape that resists uniformity to this day. The result is a living record of how fiscal policy, private property, and merchant pride shape both the skyline and the social fabric of Amsterdam. In 1602, Amsterdam's merchants pooled their capital to launch the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, creating a financial engine unlike anything Europe had seen. The city's population, barely 50,000 at the turn of the century, would quadruple in just a few generations. To house this surge, Amsterdam embarked on one of the most ambitious urban expansions of the era, the Grachtengordel, a planned belt of concentric canals and streets radiating out from the medieval core. The city government set the lines on the map: Herengracht, Keizersgracht, Prinsengracht, but it was private investment that filled in the details. Parcels along the new canals were sold to thousands of individual merchants, guilds, and craftsmen. Each buyer financed the construction of their own house or warehouse, sometimes with borrowed money, sometimes with profits from distant voyages. Instead of a single royal patron or a unified architectural style, the canal ring grew plot by plot, a mosaic of ambition and risk. The same men who funded VOC ships to Batavia or Ceylon poured their earnings into Amsterdam real estate, betting on the city's future as a global hub. The result was a cityscape that looked nothing like Paris or London. While those capitals relied on the vision and the purse of monarchs, Amsterdam's expansion was powered by distributed capital and merchant competition. The canal ring was rational and planned in its geometry, but anarchic in its ownership. No two houses were quite the same. By 1700, the city's population had soared to nearly 200,000, making Amsterdam one of Europe's largest cities. The Grachtengordel's concentric rings still define the city's heart, a testament to an era when urban growth was fueled not by royal decree, but by the collective investments of thousands of private citizens. Each canal, each narrow lot, each merchant's house stands as evidence that the city's greatest monument was not a palace or a boulevard, but the ring itself, a living record of decentralized ambition and shared prosperity. Between 1853 and 1870, Baron Haussmann, backed by Napoleon III, redrew Paris with a sweep of authority. Whole neighborhoods vanished, 325,000 people were uprooted, and medieval streets gave way to grand boulevards. French law, especially after 1841, handed the state broad powers of eminent domain. If the prefect or the emperor wanted a new avenue, private ownership posed little resistance. Expropriation for public utility meant the city's shape could be dictated from above, and Paris became a showcase for imperial ambition and state control. Amsterdam, meanwhile, was shaped by a different set of rules. The city's core was a dense grid of canal houses, each on its own slender plot, each foundation resting on wooden piles sunk into soft ground. Property rights here were not just legal abstractions, they were the backbone of a merchant society that had long governed itself. The city council was filled with property owners, and Dutch law gave them real leverage against forced sales. Municipal ordinances and centuries of custom protected owners from compulsory purchase, especially when demolishing one house risked destabilizing the entire row. Property mattered. Technical realities reinforced these legal barriers. Amsterdam's canals were not just water, they were the lifeblood of the city's foundations. Cutting a new boulevard through the canal belt would have meant draining waterways, risking subsidence, and triggering costly foundation failures. The expense of rebuilding for wider, heavier streets, plus compensating hundreds of owners, quickly exceeded the city's means. The Canal District was already valuable real estate, generating steady income for families and institutions. Destroying it would have gutted both the tax base and the city's built wealth. Foundations could not be treated as if they were interchangeable. So modernisation in Amsterdam took a different route. New railways and roads skirted the old centre, leaving the canal belt intact. Legal rights, technical limits, and economic self-interest combined to make sweeping demolition nearly impossible. That legacy endures today, preserving the canal ring as a monument to distributed ownership and the limits of state power. In the early 1970s, Dutch streets were dominated by cars, and the consequences were devastating. More than 3,000 people died in traffic crashes each year across the Netherlands, with hundreds of children among them. Deaths mounted, and in Amsterdam the danger felt especially close. Parents watched as narrow streets, once safe for walking and play, became corridors of speeding vehicles. The grief and anger reached a breaking point in 1972 when a group of parents and activists coined a phrase that would echo nationwide: "Stop de kindermoord," which means stop the child murder. The movement began not in City Hall, but on the curbs and crosswalks where daily life had become a risk. Protesters staged die-ins, blocking intersections with prams and bicycles. Children lay down on the asphalt, surrounded by signs and grieving families, forcing drivers to slow and officials to pay attention. The message was blunt: streets should belong to people, not just machines. These actions gained momentum, drawing in neighbourhood groups, sympathetic city councillors, and eventually the national media. Momentum grew after the 1973 oil crisis, when fuel shortages exposed the fragility of car-based mobility. The government responded with car-free Sundays, and Amsterdam seized the moment. City officials began to rethink the role of the street. Instead of widening roads for more traffic, they narrowed them. Instead of sidelining cyclists, they built dedicated lanes and separated bike paths. The Fietsersbond, a national cyclist union, formed to advocate for safer, more accessible cycling in every city. Over time, what started as protest became policy. Amsterdam invested in a network of protected bike routes, traffic-calm neighbourhoods, and woonhofs, residential streets where pedestrians and cyclists have priority. Today, the city boasts more than 400 kilometres of dedicated cycling infrastructure. With nearly 900,000 bikes for just over 800,000 residents, cycling is not a lifestyle choice, but a daily reality. The transformation was neither automatic nor inevitable. It was the product of citizens demanding safer streets and a city willing to listen. Amsterdam's bike-first identity is a legacy of grassroots activism and a reminder that even the most car-choked city can be reimagined from the ground up. Amsterdam's housing landscape is shaped by a quiet but powerful presence: the woningcorporaties, the housing associations. These non-profit organisations own and manage 55% of the city's housing stock, a proportion unmatched in London, Paris, or nearly any major European capital. Housing is, in this city, a shared responsibility as much as a market activity. Their roots go back to the late 19th century and the early 20th century, when social reformers, unions, and religious groups began building affordable homes to counter slum conditions in the city's growing industrial districts. Over time, these efforts evolved into a dense network of semi-independent institutions, each with its own portfolio, and all operating under a strict regulatory regime set by national and municipal policy. History and law shape the system as much as need. The core idea is simple: housing is a social good, not just a market commodity. Associations such as Stadgenoot, Waimea, and De Key are required by law to reinvest their surpluses into new construction, renovation, and rent moderation. Tenants benefit from capped rents and long-term security, while the city is able to guarantee a supply of affordable homes even in neighbourhoods where market prices have soared. That legal and financial framework preserves social mixing, and it keeps the city accessible to people from many walks of life. In many neighbourhoods, students, families and retirees live side by side, with social and market-rate apartments sharing the same block or even the same building. Small-scale shops and local services grow around that mix, reinforcing street life and everyday diversity. The stability of this model has been tested by waves of housing demand, demographic change, and political pressure. In the post-war decades, associations led the rebuilding of bombed-out districts and the construction of entire new neighbourhoods, often working hand-in-hand with city planners. In the 1990s and the 2000s, they played a central role in redeveloping areas like the Eastern Docklands, ensuring that social housing quotas were built into every new project. Stability is not accidental, it is embedded in institutions. Even as Amsterdam's population grows and the global housing market brings new challenges, the association model acts as a stabilising force. It anchors the city's dense, mixed urban fabric, making it possible for a wide range of residents to live in the very heart of the city. That outcome would be unthinkable in most European capitals where market forces alone set the rules. What this teaches is practical and political. Deliberate public stewardship of housing can sustain diversity, prevent wholesale displacement and keep urban life alive. In Amsterdam, those choices are not a policy footnote. They are the reason the city still feels like a mixed city, not a gated one. Amsterdam's reputation for tolerance is less about permissiveness than about careful management. Since the early 1800s, city officials have treated vice not as a moral failing to banish, but as a social reality to regulate. When the French Penal Code arrived in 1811, prostitution was not outlawed outright, but brothels came under police control. By the late 19th century, Amsterdam's police and health ordinances directed sex work into the medieval alleys of De Wallen, where it could be monitored and, to some extent, protected. The national ban on brothels in 1911 pushed the trade further underground, but the city continued to concentrate and supervise it rather than drive it out. That same pragmatic approach shaped drug policy. In 1976, Dutch law split drugs into hard and soft categories, sharply reducing penalties for cannabis and allowing the rise of the coffee shop, a business that remains technically illegal but is tolerated under strict conditions. Municipal ordinances and licensing schemes keep both sex work and cannabis sales confined to specific zones, with health checks and police oversight. In 2000, the Netherlands legalised brothels, and in 2001, Amsterdam officiated the world's first same-sex marriages. Each of these steps reflects a bureaucratic logic to regulate what cannot be eradicated, contain risk, and keep the city livable. Sociologists describe this as harm reduction by design, a policy tradition that aims not for moral purity, but for public safety and social order. No building in Amsterdam's historic centre rises above 30 metres. That limit is not just a quirk of tradition, it is a policy rooted in the city's foundations, both literal and legal. Municipal planners have enforced strict height caps to protect the Canal Belt's skyline, preserving the rhythm of gabled roofs and the play of sunlight on water. While London's Shard climbs to 310 metres and Paris's Tour Montparnasse towers over 200 metres, Amsterdam's tallest central structures remain at human scale. Any ambition for vertical growth has been redirected to the city's edge. Since the 1990s, the Zuidas district has become Amsterdam's designated zone for high-rise office towers and global headquarters, with buildings soaring to 100 metres and beyond. This spatial compromise keeps the UNESCO-listed core intact while accommodating modern economic pressures. The city's planners have made a clear choice: vertical ambition belongs at the periphery, not among the canals and centuries-old streets. Amsterdam's housing market has become a pressure cooker. From 2013 to 2023, official figures from the Dutch Land Registry and Statistics Netherlands show that house prices in the city jumped by roughly 80%, almost doubling in just a decade. The surge is not just about local demand. International investors, short-term rental platforms, and a tidal wave of tourists have pushed prices higher, squeezing residents and straining the city's social fabric. The City Council has responded with some of Europe's strictest measures. There is a near-total ban on new hotels unless an old one closes, and a hard cap on holiday rentals. Most homes can be rented to tourists for only 30 nights per year, and entire sections of the historic centre are off-limits to short-stay rentals altogether. Platforms like Airbnb are required to register every listing and share data with the city, while municipal officials monitor visitor numbers and housing availability in real time. Yet even these interventions struggle to keep pace with demand. The tension between a city built for residents and a market fueled by global tourism remains unresolved. Amsterdam's resilience is not nostalgia, it is a living system of choices. As cities worldwide struggle with over-tourism, housing crises, and climate threats, Amsterdam proves that radical adaptation and stubborn individuality can coexist. The city's compact canals and cycling culture are not relics, they are a blueprint for urban survival. The real question now is, will other cities dare to be this different? Share your thoughts below.